Alright guys, so for this video we are going to go over 4 different types of angle relationships. Alright, this is going to be for your day 1 angle assignment. Should help you. So the first one, if you look up here on the green, it is complementary angles. What they are 2 angles that add up to 90 degrees. I gave you 2 different examples. The first one over here, you guys should know what this box means. But if you don't, this box means it's a right angle, which is 90 degrees. So this is an example of complementary angles because this angle and this angle, these are 2 different angles. These add up to 90 degrees because of this symbol. I don't need any numbers, all right? So these 2 angles are complementary angles. All right, another example over here, it doesn't need to be next to each other and you don't need the box. For example, these 2 angles are complementary angles because I know 25 degrees and 65 degrees add up to 90 degrees. These are 2 complementary angles. They're not next to each other, but it doesn't matter. So that's complementary angles. Over here on the purple are supplementary angles. These are 2 angles that add up to 180. Again, I gave you 2 examples. Over here, this angle right here and this angle right here, these 2 are supplementary angles. The reason why I know that is because this is a line. Lines are 180 degrees, so these 2 angles are supplementary angles. And again, same thing as complementary angles, they don't need to be next to each other. So here's another example where these 2 angles are supplementary angles just because I know 70 and 110, these 2 add up to 180. So these 2 angles are also supplementary angles. All right, so there's complementary angles that are 90 degrees. Supplementary angles are add up to 180 degrees. Now, if you go up here, we have vertical angles. This is probably brand new to most of you guys. Vertical angles are created by 2 lines and are across from each other. So I drew 2 lines. These are 2 lines, and vertical angles would be, for example, this angle and this angle. These 2 angles are vertical angles. Another pair of vertical angles on this would be this angle and this angle. These 2 angles are also vertical angles. Something that's very important to know about vertical angles are they are congruent. What that means is they are equal. So for example, if this was, let's say, 100 degrees, this angle, this would also be 100 degrees. And same thing with the other pair of angles. So if this was 80 degrees, let's say, this angle over here, the vertical angle, would be 80 degrees as well. That's what it means to be congruent. All right, and as you can see, the whole thing would be 360. These 2 are supplementary, it would be 180. There's a lot of different relationships. All right, and the last one we have to go over is adjacent angles. Adjacent just basically means next to. So 2 angles that are next to each other, they also share the same vectors. So for example, I gave you a few different examples here. The first one, this angle and this angle are adjacent to each other because they're right next to each other, but they also share this vector. They are touching the same vector. So these 2 are adjacent. As you can see from before, since this is a line, these are also supplementary. So here's something really important to know. If adjacent and supplementary, that is known as a linear pair. We're going to talk about that again later on, but you don't need to know that for the assignments, but it is very common in geometry. All right, so these 2 are linear pairs. They're adjacent and they're supplementary. All right, other examples of adjacent would be these 2 over here. This angle and this angle. These are next to each other, sharing the same vector. These are adjacent. And the last example over here on the bottom. I didn't draw any angles, but there's a lot of different angles here. All right, an example of an adjacent angles would be, for example, this angle and and this angle. Another example you could say it would be, again, this angle, but this time you could say this angle. These two are adjacent. There's a lot of different possibilities for adjacent since it's just next to each other. All right, hopefully this helped you. It's just 4 different types of angles, and please ask us questions if you have any.